You are listening to The Insider with Brian Lloyd. The opinions expressed are that of the individuals and can sometimes be of an adult nature.
On this week's podcast, we are talking to Moe Honan. Thanks for coming into this. Moe is a producer who's worked on many animated titles. Your most latest one is 2x2, or to quote the US title, All Creatures Big and Small. And we were talking about this just before we started, about how, different territories have different titles. There was a bit of strategy between, why it was 2x2 here in Ireland and the UK, and it was All Creatures Big and Small in the US. Can you talk us through that, as in why the changes were?
Yeah, well, it often happens with movie titles that when they migrate into different territories for marketing reasons, the distributors decide that they want to change something. So they might feel that there's some cultural reference or connection in that territory if they come up with a title that people can find some, connection with somehow on some level. So with 2x2, I guess the reference there, which came from the E1 in UK London office, was they felt that children might be familiar with the 2x2 from nursery rhyme. Yeah. So I can't sing it for you now, but you might know it yourself. But yeah, and they might be familiar with the story on even perhaps at school through like a tertiary some instruction or maybe just listening or to little stories about how the animals came into being on the earth as we're told, so it was just the starting point for us with the story, but we didn't develop the religious aspect of the film. It's really just an inspiration and a starting point that we know about the animals who got on Noah's Ark, and we thought, well, what happened to the ones who didn't actually? And when we started developing the film years ago, that was our pitch, really. It was it's a movie about the creatures who didn't get on the ark, and that was it. One line, everybody got it, and we knew it was a great idea really from the start. But the titling is important, obviously, for the distributors to grab people's attention, to sell it, to get people to say, oh, what's that about? And we have experienced that before, where they will come back and change it when they're going into another English-speaking territory again. And this has actually happened with 2x2. We know that the US, North American and Canadian side of the company who are distributing there decided that it actually perhaps would be good to reference on some level a kind of loose religious tone about it, even though the movie is, as I say, not religious at all. Yeah, of course, but they came up with the title All Creatures Big and Small, and they've gone for that middle America, I guess, mindset that is a little bit more open to that. I think the European and UK and Irish would be a bit more skeptical, they would probably be a little bit more skeptical of that, and they'd probably just want a more generic title. It's just, it's interesting because, I know you're as a producer and you're obviously very, very involved in it. You wouldn't want to be precious about it, would you? It's the kind of thing that, you're setting this film up as, a sort of sideways look at the whole story and what have you, and now it's been turned into this, as you say, middle American Christian thing. But it is interesting to note because, you look at that film that was out last year, the one with Greg Kinnear, the one about the kid that he died and all the rest of it, that made huge money. So obviously these kind of faith-based films, if you like, are big business. So obviously E1 were aiming it towards that market, yeah? I think perhaps, but I think also in a general way, and it's true of this side of the pond as well, one of the most important things that parents like to know about a movie without maybe having to find out too much is that it is safe for their kids. Yeah, of course. Yeah. And I think in Europe and in UK and Ireland, we know generally, I guess, by the look of something, and we're making decisions all the time, maybe not realizing it, looking at something and looking at the titles that, okay, this looks like fun, this looks entertaining, or this looks safe for my kid. I can bring my young kid as well. Now, obviously, there are other ways to do that through certification and advice from IFCO and all of that. But I'm presuming, and without having lived there that much, but we know from the US and we know from the other side of the world that maybe putting that kind of subliminal message even across to people, they're kind of saying the same thing. You know, this is safe for your kids. And maybe it's well intentioned in that sense.
Yes.
Without labeling it a religious movie.
I was just before we got started, I was looking through IMDb, and you've worked on some very interesting films, like everything from like The Ugly Duckling and Me, Zombie Hotel, Thor, Legend of the Magical Hammer. Is it just in terms of your own career and stuff like that? Because I noticed they are aimed towards children a lot. I mean, has there ever been a temptation or ever been a sort of desire to do sort of maybe more adult themed animation? In terms of like something like maybe like Japanese animation, the Miyazaki thing, like all that kind of thing. Like, I mean, has that been something for you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's little seedlings of projects that are buried away there, or maybe might pop out or germinate someday. But I think being candid about it, the market for that and the possibility to get that out there and to a wide audience, at least in recent decades, has been very small and difficult to finance.
Yes.
And difficult to market. Now, that being said, I think the kind of medium of animation is getting so mainstream now, where people would have maybe looked at it and said, oh, that's a cartoon. People barely use the word cartoon anymore. They tend to say it's animation. And I think people's sensibilities around it have changed. They realise that it can be quite a sophisticated way of telling stories and isn't, just in that sense for kids. And I mean, Pixar are the kind of kings of that, and they've entertained the adults very much as well. So I think there's a shift. I think it's changing. And also there's so much crossover now also between the technologies and techniques that even movies that are aimed, for instance, at young adults or teenagers are, half animated. Really, it's like live action and VFX and animated elements. So there's a lot of merging of techniques in the film making tradition anyway. And I think it will grow, and I think it'll get out there. And also for the small screen, I think TV has opened that up as well, and there's more and more stuff coming out for grown-ups in that sense through the medium of animation.
And just in terms of Ireland, because like I say, we do seem to have a thriving animation industry, don't we? Like, because I mean, you look back into the 80s when you had Ralph Bakshi, his animation studio and so on and so forth, and right up to yourselves,
Sullivan Bluth, and
the Bluth, and
Jimmy Murakami, the grandfather of it all.
That's
in Ireland.
He was out in Soares, wasn't he?
He was here in the city. He came over to Ireland in the 70s and injected a whole life into it. And in the Sullivan Bluth studios, they did so much. And it really gave the rest of us an inspiration and a way to see that we could all grow, And if you look at it now, you're right. I mean, it's punching way above its weight internationally for the size of Ireland. Fantastic companies like Brown Bag and Cartoon Saloon and Jam Media, and there's room for all of us, and we're all doing slightly different types of genre and content and style. So there's been a huge growth on it, and I think it's really been taken hopefully much more seriously now in the industry as well, that we are filmmakers and we're storytellers, and we're growing an industry and creating jobs for people.
This is it. I mean, you look at like Song of the Sea, like it was a fantastic film, like,
beautiful film,
beautiful film.
And Tom Moore's work, I mean, and Paul, they're great guys again, and they're doing fantastic work. And the kind of work they're doing on their feature films it's more skewed, I guess, in an artistic sense, and they've benefited from that in terms of their Oscar nominations and those kind of accolades, and totally deserved, And then you look at other types of formats. I mean, 2x2, the film that I produced, and was really, it's Ireland's highest grossing film this year, actually.
Is it really?
Yes, which is a kind of a mad statistic.
And we wouldn't,
you never know how things go commercially. I'm mentioning it in that sense to say we always intended it to be a commercial film, as opposed to trying to have a more artistic, art house film. But that being said, you can often produce and make a film that is
they can have both elements.
And that you feel you can stand over, and that is of a very high standard. And you may not reach the audience. You may not get the distribution and exploitation that the film deserves. So we feel delighted and lucky that 2x2 made the kind of
the money that it did,
got the attention it did, and got the box office back for the distributors, E1, who invested heavily in it as well. So it's all about that break in the market and getting good distribution after you've completed the film.
And have you noticed as well, I mean, because we're talking about, distribution and so on and so forth, the likes of like Netflix, for example, like the, VOD platforms and all that kind of thing. I mean, is that something that you've looked at in terms of, possibly exploiting that for your own projects?
Oh, absolutely. And E1, in this sense, again, the distributor on 2x2, they would, the model often is that when you're selling rights to a company like that, is you're actually selling them several layers of the rights. So they will also look after the streaming and VOD selling, as well as the DVD. And it's all part of it. It's all essential. I mean, theatrical, it's the icing on the cake still, I think, for people. But I feel that has to do with getting it out there, and there's a certain prestige around it.
Exactly.
But it really is a shop window. It's not actually going to
earn the money,
the financing. Even with a successful theatrical release, you really have to go down through the various platforms and other revenue streams to try to get the financing back. And if you're fortunate beyond that, then you may see some profit.
I mean, do you think that's indicative of just animation, or do you think that's kind of true of all genres, not just animation?
That's true of all films.
Really?
Yeah, it is. I mean, theatrical is, I mean, of course, if you have a massive Hollywood box office hit, you're into different territory. But I think in the independent scene, and certainly the films that we can make out of Europe with the budgets we have and the financing structures we have, you need a good hit, but you need to sell it very widely, and you do need to sell it through the various platforms to recoup, and, as I say, to try to make some profit. And I mean, then that's an ideal scenario, because then you have something back where you can start to develop your next projects, create a more solid base for job creation, and try and build, because you need to keep that rolling over. And that's the challenge. That's the difficult bit, because otherwise you're investing all your time and energy into making something, and if you can't get anything back to reinvest, you're not going anywhere. Yeah.
Just to kind of change it up completely, right? I don't know if you saw this recently, but Colin Trevorrow, who is the director of Jurassic World, he recently stated in an interview that that the reason why women don't get involved in big budget productions like 2x2 and all the rest of it, and not just in animation but in terms of like live action films as well, is that women, for the most part, seem to they don't seem to prefer to do big business with studios, that they'd rather do something smaller and more independent and stuff like that. I mean, you as a woman, you're a working producer, you're doing all these kind of things. What's your take? I mean, how do you find animation working in it as a woman?
Well, I haven't heard that comment before. I don't know how true it is, actually. I'm not saying it isn't, but I haven't thought about who may not be involved in the bigger Hollywood studios when it comes to the business side. But there are quite a number of women involved in the industry. A huge amount, actually.
Yeah, absolutely.
In the animation industry, in my experience, there are less, but a growing number. And I think we're still also seeing a situation where the majority of animators themselves would tend to be male. But it really is changing. I mean, in 2x2 we had lots of female animators working in the different territories as well, and there are more and more of them choosing it as a career and coming out of the colleges now, and they're really good. So I think it is shifting. I think it's changing. On the business end, I guess it's like a lot of career choices for people, but it's tough in the sense that you do need to be flexible with your hours. You need to work late, you need to travel a lot. So perhaps we're always going to have some kind of imbalance there unless we properly tackle childcare being equal. Of course, yeah. But let's not start into all of that.
Okay, all right, yeah. Well, I mean, it's just, we'd be here all day.
My little hobby horses, but go on.
Yeah, no, but I mean, it is kind of the thing that there does need to be, because yourself, obviously, working on a film, it is something that is going to take you up into your entire life for 3 to 6 months if you're lucky, and then you have press afterwards and stuff like that. So it is the kind of thing that women do need to be. There do need to be allowances made in terms of childcare protection and so on and so forth, and all that kind of thing. But just to kind of go back to the women in animation and so on and so forth. I mean, do you find that is it a boys' club basically? Is it the kind of do you find it a barring? Is there a bar to women entering animation as an industry?
Not at all.
Not at all. No.
No, and actually, I would say that the animation industry, and certainly the way I've experienced it in Europe, where I find a lot of my co-producing partners, and certainly within Ireland, where I know a lot of the companies and the people who run them very well through the years, it's highly collaborative. It tends to be a little bit different that way to live action, which is interesting. I'm not saying that live action companies can't be collaborative, but animation really genuinely is, and I think there's a great level of support to each other, and it's, while we're all in the same industry and theoretically competing, there isn't that kind of sense of rivalry that's negative. It's a collaborative thing, and I would find that a lot of the men that I've met in that industry and that know out of the Irish industry as well are very helpful and supportive, and actually really welcome the gender balance changing. So I wouldn't see any bar to it, to be honest. I think it's just a choice thing and a cultural thing, and I think a lot of these things are changing anyway.
Just actually you mentioned there about the difference between animation and live action. I mean, again, you working as a producer, your career up until now has been animation. Do you see yourself ever getting into live action? Is it something you'd be interested in?
I actually started the other way around.
Really?
I started working in media in a general sense. I started in radio.
Oh, really?
And I worked at it part-time, local radio in the news and arts sections.
Yeah.
I then started working with TV crews, freelancing, doing all sorts of programming and live TV, and I worked on documentary as well.
Wow.
And I kind of stumbled into animation many years ago, and it was because I think I had, from my work experience, had also worked a lot in post-production and in studio-based stuff. And I worked a lot with people doing directing voice and directing projects in post-production. And that's really opened a door to me to work on certain projects, and I just grafted away at that kind of thing for a many number of years, and eventually grew into the role of producer on projects. So I kind of came in a back door in a way. I didn't train as an animator, so I became a producer within animation through that road. But and even still, I think when I look back on it, the element that I've mentioned that I'd miss or might enjoy returning to at some point is radio, actually.
Really?
Yeah.
So you're kind of
it's the one that I just find it so appealing, and I think it can fill another space, without
that's interesting.
Bombarding people. But yeah,
that's very interesting. Is it the kind of thing again, just to kind of keep it on animation, I mean, is it the kind of thing that you're finding a lot of VFX studios do tend to be, they seem to be going out of business, like quite with some regularity. You know, that sort of there does seem to be something in the model that they don't seem to have a long life. You know, that sort of is that something you found yourself?
I think it's difficult. Like, first of all, in Ireland, one of the things we need to address, I guess, and continually address is the training and getting people's skills up to up to industry standards, so that we can attract more and more companies that need to, that level of work in their films, both as a service and in like a company like mine. I'm hiring in when I need it.
Yeah.
And that's really, it's difficult to keep that turning over. It's difficult for us to hold on to people. It's difficult for us to have enough people with the right skill set. So you can see when it's a live action film that needs, VFX for just a few weeks, it's done, it's gone, you know. So you're talking about a sustainability there. We just need to grow, and we need to get more people needing those skills as well to sustain it and keep those things going. Yeah.
Do you find you're getting much help from like the likes of the Irish Film Board or anything like that, or the BAI? I mean, have they been helping in any kind of way?
Absolutely. I mean, the Film Board have supported 4 or 5 of the feature films I've worked in over the last 10 years. With 2x2, they were in from the very beginning, and we developed together, and they also put funding into the production. And also with the 2 Christmas movies, the Nico films. So they've been very supportive in relation to the projects I've been involved in over the years. BAI, I know, are very supportive in a general sense to people, but I think, they don't, at least they don't seem to be seen to be supporting animation as much as we would like them to. And to be fair to them, they will say, actually, we would love to support more animation. We don't get enough projects put into us, actually.
Oh, really?
Projects. So there is something there that needs maybe to be fleshed out and to evolve as well. One of the issues inside in that little kernel is maybe that animation by its nature tends to need to be international. Yeah. If you get all that finance together because it's expensive, you need to be able to sell it to get the money back. BAI's remit is very much about
Ireland.
Cultural Irish projects, and I think one of their key policies is to support programs that wouldn't ordinarily be made. Now, obviously, there's lots of brilliant sources of storytelling in Ireland that can exploit Irish stories that would tick that box. But on the other hand, you can't. Well, I certainly don't believe in deliberately sticking that label onto a story in order to do that. I think the story has to come organically. Yeah. And very often it might be universal and not necessarily of Irish origins or of Irish culturally, inspired stories. Yeah. In order that it can travel. Yeah. So you do tend to get a slight chicken and egg there with qualifying for some of that funding. Yeah,
I mean you've actually just touched upon an interesting point. I mean, you working in an Irish animation company and so on and so forth. Is there a temptation to kind of make films, that would be, kind of, I suppose, appeal to kind of the Irishness, that sort of way? Like, I mean, and I'm not slagging Song of the Sea or anything like that, because I really did love that film, but there is the kind of tendency that, like an international audience or US audience in particular would look at it and think, oh, that's so cute, and, it's so Irish and all that kind of thing. I mean, you yourself, would you, if a project was put in front of you like this that was very sort of exploitative of Irish culture and all that kind of thing, would you have a tendency to put it to one side because of that? Or, I'm just kind of thinking, how would you...
Well, firstly, I mean, we have to say Song of the Sea cannot fall into that category because it's so, it's so pure.
Broad, yeah.
It's pure as well. Yeah. I mean, it's not trying to be that. It is that. So it's a beautifully inspired Irish story, and its merit is true in that sense. But I think... Obviously, with anything, if you start out with a project and you're, like I say, you're kind of trying to manufacture it into that from the outset, it'll never ring true.
No, of course.
And it'll always have that feeling about it that it was stuck together for some reason, or cobbled together to try and tick boxes. And I think if you start at that point, you're you're on a road to nowhere anyway, to be honest, and you just know it through working with the medium and through working with writers and developing content. You know after a while, when you gain experience there, what's going to work or not, or if something just doesn't ring true or seems false, you know it, and you don't go on, basically. Of course,
yeah.
But I know what you're saying, and I think obviously if you're tempted to do that, all I'd say is don't.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Because I think it's the wheels will come off the wagon
very
at
quickly.
some point.
Yeah. Okay, final question. Where do you see the Irish animation industry gone in the next 10 years? I mean, do you think it's going to be the kind of thing that we're going to be able to compete with the likes of Pixar? Do you think it's going to be something that's going to be more niche? What do you think?
Well, I think we actually are already competing with Pixar, in the sense that certainly if you look at the film 2x2, its standard of animation and quality is very, very high, and it has proven in the market that it can sell. Now, obviously, it wouldn't have, I was going to say half the budget, but it wouldn't have a tenth of the budget that something coming out of Pixar would have. Plus, it's not going to have the distribution and marketing budget behind it that Pixar movies have. So, if you look at it from a point of the market size, and the kind of budget and business models we have, then we're absolutely out there and doing fantastic already, and can only grow. We can't have the same traction as something as big as Hollywood.
Yeah, of course.
But we're certainly performing within the models we have.
Yeah.
And given the talent base and base and the growing skill set in Ireland and its reputation, I can only see it getting better and better. We're ideally placed here in Ireland. We're English speaking. Yeah. We've got a tradition for storytelling. We're building up our talent base, as I say, and I think we're very attractive as partners in this industry to the whole world now. And as we know, Brown Bag had huge news there last week.
That's
with
right,
their
when they're bought
Canadian buyout.
Yeah.
I mean, fantastic news for them, and I think it's really good for the industry, actually, because it just opens up more doors and more paths for people to form connections with business.
Absolutely. Okay, Moe Honan, thanks a mil.
Thanks, Brian.
Cheers.